Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Thursday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky, Max Christie is ready to go. Looking forward to a bigger opportunity this year. What does the season hold for him? That's next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, no matter how or where, you get your podcasts. This one's always free. It is never behind a paywall. And Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go hang out with over 25,000 subscribers to the channel, Andy, all of whom are waiting in anticipation for Max Christie to be given an opportunity to live up to the $32 million contract he signed this offseason. Really an opportunity to live up to anything, given what happened last year. So we'll get into all that. He commented to the Spectrum SportsNet folks this week, and so we want to bring that to you. We talk a little Max Christie, get into a few other things as well, but I want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel now through September 22nd. All FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So, a few other things, Andy, to get into over the course of today's show, including some reaction to the Christian Coloco scouting report that we did for yesterday. Dwight Howard is on Dancing with the Stars. Woj dropped his last Woj bomb, which was exit stage left for him. I don't think a lot of people saw that coming. But let's start with Max Christie, because
including, by the way, according to reports, ESPN. was reading a report from The Athletic, and this was not just a surprise to all of those who follow Woj on Twitter and follow the NBA. This was apparently a surprise to everybody.
Well, see, he's the only guy who's going to leak from Woj is Woj, and the only person he was going to report the news to was himself. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, this was a piece of news that was not getting out. So we'll talk about that, because
not even Shams could get this one.
Nope. We will. It has a pretty profound impact on the way the NBA is covered. So we'll try to get into that before the end of the show. But Christie, maybe there are other things. The playing time for Rui. There were other things that Darvin did that were sort of a season-long, what are we doing here kind of moment for a lot of Lakers fans. But I don't think anything necessarily was bigger than the way that Max Christie wasn't used last season. Clearly by the end of the year, he was frustrated. And in talking to Spectrum SportsNet this week, it's clear he's excited to get going again with a new regime.
Yeah, he said to, I believe it was Allie Clifton interviewing him.
I believe so, yeah.
Quote, "We're building something great here. We've got two big dogs in LeBron and AD. We've got a fiery new coaching staff that I really like so far. I've been getting along with them really well." And then when asked about takeaways from his last season that he brought into preparing for the upcoming season, Christie said, quote, "Just mental, just how important the mental game is for me, how confident I feel right now. And that's really the byproduct of what I've worked on this summer. It's been a big part of the mental game. I think I have the skills, like you said, offensively, I shoot the ball pretty well, and defensively, I'm athletic enough and have good instincts to guard people. For me, it's just having the confidence to be able to put that into action when I'm on the floor." And there were a few things that jumped out at me from there. But first of all, him referring to JJ Redick and the coaching staff as fiery and getting along with them. The latter part obviously could be taken as a shot at Darvin Ham, who, look, I doubt Max Christie dislikes Darvin Ham on a personal level, because Darvin seems like a pretty difficult guy to dislike as a human being.
And I'm sure Darvin wasn't making his his rotation choices with Christie based on like a personal dislike of Christie, who also seems like a difficult young player to dislike as a human.
But that said, I am very, very confident that he disliked Darvin Ham as a guy who made decisions with the rotation. I say that with 100% confidence and zero reporting whatsoever. I'm just willing to put that one out there. I also like, though, the description of the coaching staff as fiery. It checks with a lot of what we've heard about JJ Redick in his personality, in the way he's described himself, in the way that he was looking for assistants to put alongside him that were, in his words, sickos, just people that live, breathe, eat obsessively basketball. Like, they just want to keep unpeeling the layers of this metaphorical onion, looking for answers. And also, too, it tracks with something I've talked about before, which is I get a very strong sense that JJ Redick wants to create more urgency with the preseason, with training camp, with these early practices, with the early part of the season, more so than I've seen sometimes with this franchise in general, but definitely in the LeBron era. The only preseason I recall it ever feeling like everyone was locked in from Jump Street was the first season with Anthony Davis. And that was a season where there was a lot to prove for a lot of different people. LeBron had a disappointing first season with the Lakers where, quite frankly, he alienated a lot of fans. Anthony Davis had napalmed his way from New Orleans to the Lakers, and the Lakers rightly gave up a lot to bring him in. And Frank Vogel was also the coach of this team, and he was at best their third choice. I would argue their fourth, very unceremoniously brought in. And even Rob Pelinka, like his first season running the show. Like I felt like there was more urgency that season than we've ever felt since. I think it's hurt the team at times. So thus far, it feels like that is not going to be the vibe, and I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah, and are there a lot of guys that have like that sort of chip on their shoulder that are going to enter into, like, you don't think of Max Christie angry, like that was angry Max Christie, I think, that we saw in that clip. Like that's what that looks like, and it's still pretty mellow. But like you see, like last year, I mean, he said it so much, in his exit interviews and stuff like that. Last year bugged the bleep out of him. He was not pleased. He didn't, create a scene out of it, and he wasn't a locker room problem, whatever, but he didn't like it, and nor would you want him to. And I think the idea of him coming into the season a little bit mad, highly motivated, it's not just like, satisfied with, I got my contract, really excited, whatever coach wants me to do. Like, I think he wants to go seize a larger opportunity. The opportunity, quite frankly, he thinks he should have gotten last year with this group. And I wish they had 3 or 4 more guys kind of in that boat. And I was sort of thinking about it, like, how many players do they have that are kind of like that? You could say like D'Angelo Russell comes in with a lot to prove and all that stuff. And I guess he does. But at the same time, I'm not sure there's really anything at this point that, people are saying like D'Lo can, like, he's got to prove he wants to stay with this organization. There's nothing D'Angelo Russell can do at this point to make the Lakers like decide, you know what, we're going to keep him. We're on board long term with D'Lo, and if
information that they don't already have, like if they decide for whatever reason, you know what, this is probably the best we're going to do for various cap reasons, whatever. Let's figure out a reasonable long term deal so we're not doing this every single year. Whatever, but I doubt they're going to have epiphanies about D'Angelo Russell.
Right, and if you were D'Lo and they were like, you know what, we believe, we love the way you're coming into camp, and we love how you've played the first few weeks of the season. You're our guy for the long term. Would you believe them if Rob Pelinka and those guys came to you and said that in late November, early December?
No.
Yeah, me neither.
No.
So like that ship has sailed. And so, it does lead to an interesting question, though. Dan Wojnarowski at the Times explored this in his, I think it's his most recent newsletter about players that are under scrutiny. And Christie is certainly among them. But there are a couple other guys that I think are in this category as well. So we'll talk about that when we get back.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by Game Time. The best concert I've ever been to in my life was George Clinton and the Parliament Funkadelic, 1992 in Hollywood at the Palladium. They played, seriously, 5 straight hours, no break. And after that concert, which has been my gold standard, I've been chasing one that could top it. I've seen a couple that came close: Prince at the Forum, Neil Young at the Greek, John Lee Hooker with a bunch of other blues legends at the House of Blues, a different George Clinton show at the House of Blues. And as I keep the quest going, I will be using Game Time because they make it easier to get tickets, like the new features such as Game Time Picks, which filters out all the confusing, flowery verbiage. They just show you incredible deals on great seats and they save you time. Game Time offers the panoramic seat views before you buy, so you know exactly what the view to the stage is going to be. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off.
Thanks again for making Locked On Lakers first listen to every day. How about Locked On NBA as your second? It is a great way to keep up on everything that's going on around the league. Lots of local hosts popping up, including oftentimes Andy. He's on that show a lot. Sometimes you'll even see him helping out with the hosting there. So check that one out. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Christie, if you're making a list of players that will be scrutinized pretty heavily this year, have a lot, something to prove, something to show people, he is as good a candidate as any. I think, there are people who don't know if $32 million for 4 years was a great investment, that might still have a bit of a THT hangover from the last time the Lakers had to make a choice about paying a guy before he had shown the production. And
thankfully, they at least didn't let anybody walk while deciding to do this with Christie. There was not an Alex Caruso that they let walk out the door and said, you know what, we'll take our chances with the less proven guy.
No, I mean, I think they were hoping certain people would walk and they couldn't get anybody to leave. Yeah. I mean, everybody kept walking back. So,
which also, by the way, not Christie's fault either.
Not Christie's fault in the slightest. But look, I mean, like Hollinger wrote about this. We did a little bit on this on a show a couple weeks ago, like Hollinger looking at that contract. I think he missed the boat on a lot of things, looking at it purely from a numbers perspective and not having seen Christie play as much as people who cover the team have. But that said, it's like the numbers aren't overwhelming for Christie. It's not like the metrics, if you want to go to advanced numbers and all these things, all this stuff just leaps off the page where you can just see. Because sometimes this happens where you can see, here's a guy whose playing time has been remarkably effective. You just know Reaves was a good example of that, in that first year for him, where it's just damn, every time you put him on the floor, the combinations are better, the defense improves and so on. That hasn't happened with Christie. So I think he does need to show that this money was worth it in the same way that Rui needed to show it coming off of that playoffs. And eventually, once the rotation settled down, I think basically was the player that people thought he would. And the 3-point shooting was probably even a little bit better.
Yeah, I mean, 40% from behind the arc on reasonable volume, if not necessarily as much as I would like. I would like to see it go up. I know JJ Redick would like to see it go up. Before we get to Christie, I would even say Rui.
Fiery. JJ Redick fiery about Rui Hachimura shooting more threes.
Well, I mean, look, I've been as big of a Rui proponent as I think anybody in local media. I think everydayers know I've been pretty consistently high on what I think Rui can bring to the table. I've been frustrated at times with Darvin Ham not playing Rui as much as I think he should, but there are also areas where, quite frankly, Rui needs to do more and show that he's invested in it, like rebounding, for example. Yep. There is no reason that a guy who is 6'8", 230, as physical as Rui can be, and also as athletic as Rui is, there's no reason that he is somebody that 5 rebounds is a big game for him. You feel like he's doing work on the glass if he hits 5 or 6 rebounds. He's somebody that should be 6 or 7 minimum a night. A, so he lives up to his own potential, but B, because that's one less rebound AD has to get. It's one less rebound LeBron has to get.
You said something interesting yesterday when you were talking about the championship team and one of the things that made them so good. And it was that sort of ability to mix and match and go big or go small for them, which was still pretty big. And part of the way you were able to do things like that is like the value of having guys who are better at something than you would expect them to be, given their position, given their size, whatever it might be. One of the things that made Westbrook in his prime such an effective player is that he was capable of getting, he averaged it for a year, double-digit rebounds, getting that from your point guard. He gets it, pushes up the floor, and all these. It's a different element. And what makes Nikola Jokic so devastating? Well, for starters, he's 7 feet tall. He's got the great jump shot. He's all these other things, and super smooth or whatever. He's also the best point guard on that team. And so when you have a 7-footer who can also be your best passer, that unlocks all sorts of things.
I mean,
and obviously,
you're describing LeBron. You're describing the phenomenon that is LeBron James.
Correct. Obviously, smaller scale here, but one of the things that makes Christie a potentially useful player for this team in terms of creating lineup combinations where you can do different things is he is a good rebounder for someone at his position and someone of his size. And so can you put him on when you put him on the floor, you're getting a little bit of a boost from a position that, in that space that you're not necessarily going to get with other players. And so it's those little things that are going to make this Lakers team work. Can you find versatility and stuff that certain guys can do that's outside the scope of expectations for their position or whatever it might be? And Christie, the threes, the defense, but if the rebounding is there, if the ball handling is a little bit better than it was last year, actually a fair amount better than it was last year, but like if you can make those kinds of improvements, it is a cliche aside, new player for the Lakers because he was there. They didn't use him last year.
Yeah, and one thing I do like is that Christie, Dan Wojnarowski named him number one as the Lakers under scrutiny. We mentioned John Hollinger. I've heard like on the Hoop Collective, for example, Brian Windhorst's podcast with typically Tim McMahon and Tim Bontemps. I've heard them discuss that contract and them at least raising some questions, if not necessarily being critical of the decision. Christie seems to recognize I need to prove this. I don't think he is lacking confidence that he will, but I agree with you that it feels like he's stepping into training camp with the mindset of somebody who needs to prove a contract in the same way other people would look to earn one. Yeah. I think that's a good sign. Also, it's worth noting, too, in Wojcicki's piece, Austin Reaves made the list and among the reasons that I know I've brought this up a few times, like the idea that Reaves he's not been flat out untouchable. Like I promised that if an elite superstar had been on the table, the Lakers.
You can't. Giannis is a generous offer, but we're not giving up Reaves.
Right. But he's been pretty untouchable for a guy of his station, for somebody who's never been an all-star before. Like in similar ways that I know it's frustrated Warriors fans at times that Jonathan Kuminga has seemed untouchable despite being often very good, but not necessarily great. And I think Reaves has been better than Jonathan Kuminga over the course of their young careers. But I think there is a growing sense right now with Austin Reaves, like, okay, he needs to take another step forward to justify his status within the organization. He needs to be more than just a very good player. He needs to start feeling like a player you can't live without, or pretty close to it.
And he needs to be more of a classic third best player. We say this a lot. If you are a guy who really wants D'Angelo Russell off of this team, otherwise known as, I guess, Rob Pelinka, one key to doing that is to make other people your third best player. clearly, Rui jumps over or gets closer to D'Lo in terms of total effectiveness, or Reaves just clearly becomes a better player overall, both sides of the ball or whatever it is, than D'Lo. I mean, Russell was their third best player on balance throughout last season, and you can't just
the regular season at the very least.
I mean, you had a lot of company and guys who were inconsistent in the relatively short postseason, but you can't just trade your third best player because you want him out of the, unless it's just, you got a Grant Williams problem, like they had in Dallas, but unless it's just that toxic and that bad, you can't give him away. I mean, I've seen even people like, Darius Garland would be a great flip for, it's like, you're giving up stuff and D'Angelo Russell and all that stuff for Darius Garland. Are you really that much better? Is Garland that much better than D'Lo?
I mean, really the argument would be you think Darius Garland would be that much better in the locker room, I suppose. I mean, otherwise you're correct.
If you're looking for a reason to be optimistic about Reaves, we'll get to Woj here next. And actually one more Laker that's under scrutiny is just this idea. Like, he really was hurt last year by the fatigue of coming in from the Team USA experience. He will not have that problem this year. So I would expect a much better start for Reaves this year. And a lot of the issues that they had around the rotation that kind of cascaded from the beginning of the year all the way through, the root of a lot of it was Reaves was terrible at the beginning of the year. They had to scramble to figure out what to do about it. So if he's much more solid from the first day of training camp, the Lakers will be in much better shape. We'll get to Woj and one more scrutinized Laker next.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Well, got a little something different for you. Now through September 22nd, which is fast approaching, all FanDuel customers can bet just $5 and you get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. And then with the YouTube TV base plan, you will be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you got to do is just get a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. And while you are signing up for this, you can also think about the 24-25 odds for the upcoming NBA season, courtesy of our friends at FanDuel. As of this recording, the Lakers are 35-1 to win the championship. Anthony Davis, 150-1 for MVP, also 25-1 for Defensive Player of the Year. Dalton Connect, 10-1 for Rookie of the Year. And Max Christie, we just spoke about, 150-1 for Most Improved Player. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook.
Different lists, but if you're also looking for highly motivated, highly scrutinized Lakers, start with JJ Redick. CBS Sports came out with a ranking of all 30 NBA coaches, 1 through 30. No surprise who was at the top, Eric Spoelstra. Number 30 was JJ Redick, and he was in the category of coaches at the bottom that were basically put there because to use the multiple choice test terminology, not enough information given. And of all the people for whom not enough information was given, like, there are volumes written about Jordi Fernandez compared to JJ Redick, who doesn't even have the time as an assistant or a video coordinator or anything. So it's just like, we don't know. And I don't know. I mean, you're going to tell me JJ Redick's the 26th, the 30th. It's like, it's a perfectly good reason to put him in.
I can't tell you anything. I don't know. I mean, for all we know, he's the number 1. Like, I mean, we have no idea. I'm
pretty sure he's not number 1.
No, but I mean, look,
you're right. He could be.
Steve Kerr, after his first season with Golden State, people were talking about him as one of the best coaches in the league. So true. It is entirely possible that
he also had he did have executive experience, though.
The
reason I bring it up,
it's probable. I'm just saying it is possible that this could end and be like, damn, coach of the year. Who'd have thunk it?
The reason I bring it up is because, not to try to figure out definitively where Redick should be, because nobody knows.
A waste of time.
It's a total waste of time, or even to debate the point. But it's like, the Lakers are counting on him to be definitively better than Darvin Ham was last year, to have a plan and a routine and not lose 3 or 4 games over the course of the season that are related to your rotation, to the vibes, to disorganization in terms of how things are handled, let alone in-game decision making. The question that came to my mind when I saw that ranking wasn't where should Redick be. It's if Darvin was still the coach, where do you think he would have landed on a list of 1 through 30 of NBA head coaches?
I'm guessing 20, something like that. Because I got a sense that a lot of media and like the type of people who would make these lists in the first place felt like Darvin was made into a scapegoat for bad decisions made by the front office. And I don't know, just not being able to match up well against Denver. But there's a pretty strong sense I have seen that people feel Darvin got blamed for a lot of stuff that was not his fault. Whether you agree with that or not, I mean, we've gone over this topic a zillion times as far as Darvin goes. That's just why I think he would come in about 20th as opposed to, I'll put it this way, I think he could be closer to 17 than 30.
Well, I mean, I look at it like, the new guys are all 26 or 30, Jordy Fernandez, Charles Lee, Brian Keefe, so on and so on. But like, guys like Chauncey, Billy Donovan, JB Bickerstaff, guys with a little bit of track record, Doc Rivers, that's 22 through 25.
Doc bitched so much about his job, you can't put him above 20.
I don't think Doc's that great coach. I don't think, Willie Green is 19. Jamal Mosley on the Magic is 18. I think most people would say Jamal Mosley better coach than
I think
Darvin
that's
Ham.
too low for Jamal Mosley.
I agree with you, but and so like realistically, if Darvin Ham would sort of be a bottom third coach, fair or unfair, the perception of him would be as a bottom third coach. I think he would have ranked pretty close to the bottom of the guys who have coaching experience.
It's probably accurate.
If that's the case, then Redick doesn't need to make a massive leap to clear that bar, of being better than Darvin, of being an improvement over Darvin. And so like it was just, and I don't like sort of doing things that seem like you're just sort of piling on Darvin for the sake of it. But it is the relative comparison of those guys is really important in a season where it's not that like they gave Redick a different roster to work with, and the gods are almost trying to give him exactly the same like players like available, like the same injury situation. Like Jared Vanderbilt may or may not play. Like Christian Wood, he can be gone for a little while. Like there could be a lot of similarity between those two things. So that's one of the things that it got me thinking about. Actually, you want to do Woj or the mailbag item about Christian Wood?
Let's go Woj. This was the news of the day. We'll save the item about Christian Wood.
I met Woj when we were in the building more, working for ESPN and ESPN Radio, and I was in the building more. I mean, I met Woj a few times.
I've done a couple radio shows with Woj,
but I didn't know him at all. And like we had no, like all these stories you see about Woj and like how he treated other, like he had no interaction with us to do that sort of thing. That said, the man had a profound impact on the way that we cover, like people look at the game and how it's covered and how news is delivered and the tone and tenor of free agency and all this other stuff. So much of this stuff, whether you like it or not about the NBA, is traced back to Adrian Wojnarowski's news breaking ability and how that became a thing, a pillar of NBA culture as much as anything that happens on the floor.
I mean, you mentioned it being a culture. It became an industry. Like I think it was Anthony Irwin. I saw, the host of Lakers Lounge, former host of this show. I think he phrased it as Woj was economy, and that's not an exaggeration. I mean, Woj, the amount of attention that Woj helped create, and again, that culture that, people like Shams and Chris Haynes and Mark Stein, Sam Amick, like some of the people that you really think about breaking news in the NBA, and then moving outward, Adam Schefter for the NFL, or Jeff Passan in baseball, guys like Pete Thamel in college football, Bruce Feldman, like this type of breathless coverage of everything, and the race to be first all the time, even though the way media works now, nobody even remembers who's first with any of
No, they remember the guys who are often first. Like they remember, oh, it's a Shams bomb, Woj bomb, whatever. But if you ask people like, oh, who actually was the guy who broke it? And they don't know that. Nobody remembers which of those two. They just remember those are the only two guys who ever seem to break news.
Because it ultimately doesn't matter, and mattered greatly in terms of just creating the way we talk about the NBA, the way we consume the NBA. And it is, quite frankly, an exhausting way to live, which is what Woj, in the post that he bombed in letting us know, the final Woj bomb, this will be it. He's going to be helping run St. Bonaventure's basketball program. It's his alma mater. He's been a very open fan of the program for a long, long time, that he basically didn't have the energy to do this anymore. And this has been building in him for a while. I read a report on The Athletic, like Richard Deitch and those guys who were very plugged into everything media. Apparently this really took ESPN by surprise. Like they had no idea that this was coming. But like, it is exhausting the way guys like Woj and Shams and Schefter and those guys can't ever just put their phone down. They can't ever unplug. Like
if you're going to make this your brand, then you can't unplug, because the minute somebody else starts breaking stories because you went to Hawaii for 2 weeks, your brand is beaten.
You and I, for example, have covered the Lakers for a long time. We covered the Dodgers for a few years. Like we've been boots on the ground guys for teams, and we have found that exhausting. And that ain't bleep compared to what those guys do. Like we're not even in the stratosphere of the energy devoted.
I'll tell you once, I hated it. I loved reporting. I like asking people questions. We still love asking people questions. Our favorite thing to do, both of us, in terms of media stuff, is interview people. But that's the big difference between interviewing people, asking questions, reporting things, finding something interesting, finding somebody else to talk to about that thing, and breaking news and reporting, and the limited amount of that I had to do, whether it was with ESPN or the other, or try to do, because I was really bad at it, with ESPN or the Athletic. I hated it. I hated every bit of it. And to make that your brand, I'm surprised that it took Woj 37 years to burn out. We can talk a little bit more about this tomorrow, but I'm very
really changed the industry.
And I'm interested now, and I was going to say, to see what changes now, because part of what made this sort of thing work is it wasn't just Woj, it was like Shams versus Woj. Well, now Woj isn't there anymore. And so if you take that away, what changes about sort of NBA culture? I think there'll be something to it. Do want to remind people to go ahead and check out Locked On NBA as your second listen of every day. You can find the link in the show notes, so you don't even have to search for it. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go hang out with over 25,000 subscribers. We'll be back tomorrow, getting closer to training camp. See everyone then.